Welcome back. So far we've looked at a couple of things. We've looked at the definition of opportunity cost and how that relates to the definition of economics. And we talked about the production possibility frontier, or the production possibility curve. But remember, the object of this week's class is really to understand why we have trade. And to do that, we have to have a couple of further steps that we will discuss now. First of all, we'll talk about comparative advantage and absolute advantage and the difference between the two. And then we'll end up by talking about specialization and how specialization allows us to achieve more with our limited resources. In some sense, it allows us to, each of us, to be outside our individual production possibility frontier through trading. And that's the goal for the rest of this week's classes. So let's go ahead and let's start with an example. And you know, my examples are always very simple, they're very reduced, the numbers are very easy. There's a lot of real life that is not included in this example, but there is a purpose for this example. In this specific case, I was thinking of how can I think of trade and think of the most basic trading institution. So in your mind, you're probably thinking, okay, before we had money, we had barter, so maybe I'm thinking of some sort of a barter system. But even before we had barter between families, we had trading within a family. So the example for today's section, or for this section, is going to be trade between a man and a woman. Okay, eventually we might think of it maybe as a husband and a wife, but between a man and a woman. And the purpose of this example is to think how maybe two people can benefit from this trade. So this particular example is based on a seminal work by Gary Becker called A Treatise on the Family. And Gary Becker, Nobel Prize winning economist at the University of Chicago, used economic theory to explain household structure. So he used it to explain how families form, how we decide how many children to have, to explain divorce rates, to explain bequest between parents and their children, to explain how children help out their aging parents. So many of these ideas were explained through economic theory in this seminal work. And my example is based on this seminal work in that what we're trying to do is explain a formation of a family with basic economic concepts. So let's start with this example. And in this example, we are in the role of marriage consultants. So we have two people here, Sarah and Abe, and we have to decide whether or not they should marry. So let me tell you a little bit about Sarah and Abe, just to make the example more concrete. So let's put a little bit more data onto this example and make it into a numerical example. So here are a few facts about Abe and Sarah. For each hour of their time, if they spend it in the home front, if they produce home goods, Sarah will be able to create 5 home goods, and Abe will be able to create 2 home goods. On the other hand, for each hour that they spend in the marketplace, Sarah will be able to produce 10 units of market goods, and Abe will be able to produce 8 units of market goods. I'm making an assumption here that they can divide the time any way they want between market goods and home goods. So for example, Abe could decide to work 6 hours at home and 6 hours in the marketplace. He could even decide to work 11 hours at home and 1 hour in the marketplace. And you might feel this is a little bit unrealistic because after all, it's very hard to get a job that only employs you for 1 hour a day. But that's not going to confuse us. We already are familiar with this assumption that we're just smoothing things out in order to just interpret this example as much as we can. So you may have noticed when you looked at these data that when I assigned the abilities to Sarah and Abe, I made Sarah better at both tasks. So for each hour that Sarah spends at home, she makes more goods than each hour that Abe spends at home. And similarly, for each hour they spend in the marketplace, Sarah produces more units in the marketplace than Abe would produce in the marketplace. And you might wonder, why did I make Sarah better at both tasks? So one explanation is that I'm just sexist and I just think women are always better in everything that they do. But here at Penn, I always give a little bit of a different story. University of Pennsylvania has a long-standing rivalry with the University of Princeton. So when I give this example to my students, I always say Abe was obviously a graduate of Princeton, but Sarah was obviously a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania. So that's why she is better in both tasks. Either way, let's just give a little bit of a formal definition to being better. The sense in which Sarah is better in both tasks is that she has an absolute advantage in each of these tasks. So let's give the formal definition. A person or a country or firm has an absolute advantage if they can produce more per unit of input. So in this case, the unit of input is time or an hour, and Sarah has an absolute advantage in home goods because she can produce more home goods per hour. And Abe has, let me say that again, and Sarah has the absolute advantage in market goods because she can produce more for each hour in the marketplace than Abe can. So again, we have Sarah being better at both tasks. She has the absolute advantage in both tasks. So now we have enough data to go ahead and draw the production possibility frontiers for Sarah and for Abe individually. So what I'd like you to do is pause the tape for a minute and draw the PPFs for Abe and for Sarah. And because I want us to end up with the same graphs, would you please put market goods on the horizontal axis and home goods on the vertical axis? And that way my graph and your graphs will be the same. So we'll pause it now, you'll draw the graphs, and then we'll compare them, and then we'll go on. Thank you. So hopefully when you drew Abe and Sarah's production possibility frontier, you got a picture that looks like this. It's easy to find the intersections, right? So this is the point where Abe spends all his time at home. So we have 12 times 2, or 24 units of home goods. This is the point where he spends all his time in the marketplace, and we have 8 times 12, or 96 units of market goods. The slope of this line is, of course, the opportunity cost of a market good in terms of home goods. Right, and in this case, it's going to be 24 divided by 96, which is equal to 1/4. So that's the slope of Abe's opportunity cost. That's the slope of his PPF, and that is his opportunity cost of a market good. What about Sarah's production possibility frontier? Of course, the intercept here is going to be 5 times 12. The intercept on the market good axis is going to be 10 times 12, or 120. And again, the slope of the production possibility frontier is going to be the opportunity cost of a market good in terms of home goods. And in this case, it's equal to 60 over 120, which is equal to 1/2. And we can see that Sarah's production possibility frontier is further out than Abe's production possibility frontier. This shows the fact that she can produce more of home goods and more of market goods. But I want us to especially note that the slopes of these two production possibility frontiers are different. So we know from this that they have two different opportunity costs of producing market goods. Before we go on, I want us to just remind ourselves that any point along the production possibility frontier is efficient in terms of production. Any point inside the PPF is inefficient. We're not using our resources in the most efficient way. And remember, of course, that points outside the production possibility frontier are points that are unattainable. So let me go ahead and label these points. So points A, B, and C, these are all efficient in terms of production. Point D is a point that's inefficient, and point E is a point that is unattainable. Which point would you choose among the attainable and efficient points? Which points you would choose between, in this case, A, B, and C, and all these other points that are possible points along the production possibility frontier, really depends on your preferences. So some of us may want a lot of home-baked cookies, and in that case we might choose a point such as this point here, call it point F, and some of us might want a lot of market goods, and we might want to choose this point here, call it point G. And none of these points are the wrong point. It really depends on the combination of goods that we want. It's important, for the sake of my example, to think about the preferences of one of the parties. And in particular, I want us to think about the preferences of Abe. And I'm going to tell you something about Abe. And specifically, I'm going to tell you that Abe always wants 10 units of home goods. He's just worked out that that is what makes him the happiest he can be. So every day, he has 10 units of home goods, and we can read off the production possibility frontier what this means in terms of market goods. And you can work it out, and you'll see that this means that he consumes 56 units of market goods. Let's do this calculation maybe a little bit quickly in our heads. 10 units of home goods at 2 units per hour means that he would have to spend 5 hours at home, and this leaves him 12 minus 5, or 7 hours in the marketplace, and of course 7 hours times 8 means that he can consume 56 units of market goods. So we've proved through this calculation that indeed this point here is a point on his production possibility frontier. So it's an attainable point, it is an efficient point in terms of production, but for the sake of the example, as I will be developing it in just a few minutes, I want us to realize that this is not only efficient in terms of production, but this is also, for Abe, the best of all the attainable points. So this is his preferred point. So I'm going to put a little star here just to remind ourselves that this is Abe's preferred point from all other points.